Welcome to Conquering Your Clownfish, a podcast dedicated to transforming disabilities into special abilities. I'm your host, Brady Murray. Welcome to Conquering Your Clownfish. I am thrilled to welcome our special guest today, Erin Eicher. She is a wife and a homeschooling mother of four, navigating the journey of raising her youngest child with Down syndrome. Erin and her family reside on a beautiful 7-acre property in the Midwest, cherishing every moment spent together as a family. So welcome to the show, Erin.
Yes, thank you for having me. This is great.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun to be able to visit with you. I actually want to start with the 7 acres that you guys live on. Tell me more about that. You have animals, you have a garden. This is probably more of a personal thing for me.
Yeah. Well, this was my husband's dream to live out in the country, and I did not grow up as a country person at all. I lived in a small town, actually in upstate New York. And yeah, when we were previously missionaries, which we can talk about that later, but when we moved back to the United States, this was his dream. And so God really just placed this property in our hands. It's kind of
Wow.
a long story. We don't need to go into it, but it's really amazing how it all came together. And we don't have a lot of animals. We have chickens, and we raise chickens sometimes for meat, and then we always have chickens for eggs. And then we have had one calf for a while. We don't really have the space for like large animals.
Yeah.
We don't have it fenced off at least. So most of our property is for the kids to play in. We
Wow.
love it. Our kids play soccer, and we have almost a full soccer field.
Wow.
And we have a small little pond that has fish in it. And it's been amazing. Like, I didn't think that this would be something that I would love, but it has been such a great like haven for us as a family. And we love to have people out here, and kids love to just run and run and run and play. And we often do parties in the fall and give kids flashlights and say, go have fun. And they just run around with their flashlights and have a blast.
What a dream. What a
So,
dream. That is fun. That definitely is a personal dream of mine as well, especially the pond with fish in it. I think that would be so fun to have a
yeah.
fish pond for the kiddos.
Yeah. And of course, with a pond, you get other critters too, which my
Yeah.
one son loves to catch the frogs. And the amount of large bullfrogs that he has caught is unreal. But he's like, I don't know. He's amazing at it. He'll even do it with his bare hands.
Wow.
Bare hands or a net, or he's learned how to do it with a fishing pole, and you just dangle the hook in front of him and they grab it and he's got it.
I'll be dinged. Well, that's fun. Yep, that's fun.
Yep.
We can all dream, right? We can all dream.
Yeah.
So, Erin, I am just super thankful to have you on the show. As I've prepared for this podcast, I actually am really curious and would love to explore about your time in Southeast Asia as a missionary.
Hmm.
So, because I think there's so much of your life is connected to just that experience that you had. So, if you could you share with us about that experience? How did that come about? Let's start there.
Yeah. So my husband and I both did short-term mission trips when we were teenagers, actually with the same organization. But we didn't meet each other until after high school. We met up. This organization had a year-long internship, and that's where we met. And then later on started dating in college and got married. But that's kind of how the just the love for the world came about for both of us, is just the short-term trips that we went on 1 month to 2 months long. And when we decided to start dating and then get married, we said, that's what we want to do. We want to be missionaries. My husband was getting a degree in international community development, and it made sense for us. That's what we wanted. So he finished school. We actually worked for a missionary organization for a while, and then we decided, okay, we want to go full term. And we prayed a lot and sought out different organizations, and we found one that was working in Southeast Asia, and they felt like we were a good match for them, and we decided to go. And I won't say the organization's name, but yeah, we actually lived in two different countries. We lived in one country for about 3 years, and then we lived in another country for about another 3 years. Altogether, it was like 7 years that
Wow.
we were missionaries. Of course, some of that time you come back to the United States to raise funds and things like that.
Yeah.
But our oldest child was actually born in Southeast Asia. So,
Wow. Wow.
yeah.
So you and Rob recently married, and you feel a desire, a call, if you may, to be able to
Yeah.
move to Southeast Asia, two different countries, total time away 7 years. And
Hmm.
so this is not common, okay? So this
Right.
is
I know.
not
When people hear
common
that, they're like,
for
what? Especially when
everybody.
I say my son was born, my first was born over there. But
Yeah. So what did you learn from that experience?
oh, goodness. There's so much. Um, the biggest thing is, just trusting God. There's so many unknowns when you go as a foreigner to another country. Um, you just, even if you've studied the culture, you don't know the culture because you didn't grow up there. And so you are truly a foreigner. You don't know the language, you don't know the ins and outs of just all of the things that make up a culture. And so there's so much where you just have to say, okay, God, I'm just trusting you in all of these situations that we find ourselves in. And so whenever we go through hard things, like now that we live back in the United States, I think often of like, you've never failed us, God, you've never failed us. I look at these different situations that we had while living overseas, and He's always provided for us, always watched out for us, always had an answer. Doesn't mean that it was always easy. It was not easy to live there, and there were highs and lows, I guess, like anything. But so I think that's one of the biggest things is learning to just trust Him and trust Him that He has the next step. He's already got it. He's already there. Even though I may be worried about the next step, He's already there and He's already got it worked out.
What was the hardest part about that experience?
The hardest thing is definitely being away from your family
Hmm.
and having, things happen at home, whether, we had a few deaths in our family, but like my husband's grandmother passed away. I had a grandmother pass away. And so those are really hard to miss those moments. And there were times that we were able to come back. Like my mother had, thankfully, a benign brain tumor, but we were able to come back for that surgery. But there were some situations that we just couldn't. One of the times when the grandmother passed away, I was like 7 or 8 months pregnant.
Hmm.
You can't just get on a plane and fly internationally across the world. And so things like that were really hard. And like I said about being the foreigner, I mean, it you are just the outsider, and so you're always the outsider. And even though we made friends and that kind of thing, we're always the person that doesn't quite fit in.
Yeah.
so so that kind of rubs after a while. It can really kind of wear you down.
Yeah. Yeah. How many children in total did you have in a foreign land? There's the one, correct? Do you have any other children
Yes.
over there?
So we just had one. That's our oldest. His name is Abraham.
Mhm.
And I have quite a story about infertility as well. And took me a very long time to get pregnant with him. And then I got pregnant with him. And then we had already had plans to move. So we just decided keep the plans. We're moving. And then after him, we tried and tried and tried for many, many years and was unable to get pregnant until actually 11 years after he was born.
Wow.
And we adopted in between there too.
Wow.
So he was the only one that was even living with us while we were overseas. And he remembers a lot of our time there because when we came back, he was 5 years old.
Hmm.
So yeah, he has memories of being there.
Let's talk about your adoption.
Yeah, so that started when we were living overseas. We started praying and thinking about, is this the next step for us to grow our family? And, it took us both, it was just a different journey for both of us as we were praying about it. For me, it was all about, I just want more kids and it's not happening naturally. And Lord, I just want kids. And so let's adopt. And for my husband, he's like, I don't know about that. Like, I need to really know if this is what is right for our family. And, anyway, so it just took us, we were on different timelines with it, but eventually my husband felt like, yes, let's do this. And we originally started actually with a child in Guatemala,
Hmm.
and then Guatemala, thankfully we were never matched with anyone because that would be heartbreaking. But then Guatemala closed down for international adoptions. And so then we thought we're living in, well, I didn't say the organization's name, but I can tell you I was living in China. Um, And we're living in China. We're like, it just makes sense. Why don't we adopt a child from China? Because we speak the language, we understand the culture somewhat, and we love the food. We love so much about the Chinese culture. And so, so then we continued the process. We switched over to China, and we did half of the process while still living there.
Wow.
And that was really helpful for us because of the fact that we were living there. We were able to get special documentation that said that we were basically good people living in China. And so they expedited our file. A lot
That's
of
great.
people at that time were waiting about 5 years or so to be matched with a child. And for us, I think it was like 2.5 years.
Wow. That is
So,
fast.
yeah, so we were sped along. So that was great. And she was 10 months old when
Yep.
we adopted her. And,
And then,
and then we had moved back back to the United States in the middle of all this. And
oh,
then
wow.
our adoption comes through. We thought we had a little bit more time. Well, no, now it comes through faster than we realized. And then anyway, went back to China with our son and to get her and to finalize the adoption.
So I'm looking at my notes. That's Eden. She was who was
Yes.
adopted in China. Eden's 15 now. And so
Yeah.
for our listeners to put things into perspective, continue
Yep.
down the list. There's two more stories on
There
your.
are.
Can you share with us the next one?
Yes. So we are back in the United States and just living life and thinking, Lord, we're just so thankful we have these two children and they're a blessing. And um, at one point, I was starting to have some just physical things going on. Went to the doctor. They wanted to put me on meds. I'm like, I'm not really a meds person. So I ended up going to a naturopath and he's like, okay, well, let's do this and this and this and this. And along the way, he said, do you want to have another child? And he said, well, I just want to be healthy. If another child comes along, that would be amazing. But I don't want that to be my focus because I had spent so many years of that being my focus, and it's heart wrenching when you're going into and trying to have more children and it's not happening. It's
Yeah.
just a road that I don't wish that upon anyone. And in the process of working with this naturopath and getting healthier, I was able to conceive. And I conceived once and then miscarried, which was like a dagger, like, God, how do you allow this then? And then about a year and a half later, conceived again. And that is Ezekiel. And he just turned 10 at the end of September. So my oldest son and then him are 11 years apart. So
Wow.
we went 11 years never using birth control or anything like that. And we just thought it doesn't happen for us.
Wow.
It's just not going to happen. And my first son, we conceived with him. We had been going to a fertility doctor and it was still a miracle, like, because we did the same exact treatment after him, like 10 more times and it didn't work.
Wow.
And so I just feel like all of my kids, they're just such miracles. I mean, the way that our adoption came through, even like when they called us, they said, well, you've been matched. Because in the process while we were waiting, we almost switched to a special needs child.
Hmm.
And they said, if you switch to a special needs, you cannot go back to what they call healthy child. And, but we were like, I think that's what we want to do. But in the process of that, before we had it all finalized, we get this call that, well, actually, somehow your file got like moved up and you're matched to a healthy child. And so even that, I'm like, there's so many like little things. I'm like, God, you just had your hand on that. And we were, our daughter Eden, that's who we were supposed to have.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so,
I,
she's a miracle too.
there's a lot that I reflect on as you're sharing this. Andrea and I had difficulties getting pregnant initially with our initial child, and a number of years had passed. And I remember clearly during that time, this actually was not very sensitive of me to say. Andrea didn't appreciate it as much, but I just felt it so much in my heart. I, as well, am very much a faith-driven individual, and I just felt like there's nothing more sacred, nothing more divine than bringing a child into this world. And I just feel like God's hand is on that. And, we had a number of miscarriages, and I just felt like if we just remain faithful and we keep our focus and our North Star correct, then it's going to work out how it's supposed to work out. And, I just continued to think that as you were sharing your story, because you guys are such faith-driven individuals as well. And lo and behold, you look at your family, and you're right. You said it yourself. Each individual is specifically made specifically to be in your family when they were supposed to be in your family. And I
Yeah.
think it especially goes with this last child. So share with us about Maverick and how
Yes.
this all came about.
This was another shock to our system and our family. So we were, had three children. We were done. We were not trying. We were not seeking any kind of natural remedies, nothing like that. And so when I had Ezekiel, I was 38. And then at 46, all of a sudden, my husband says, I think we should get a pregnancy test. And I'm like, you're crazy. Like, there's no way. There's no way. So he said, well, just for peace of mind, he goes, I went to Walmart and I got you one. And anyway, here it was positive. And so Maverick came, and at 46 years old, this was not trying to get pregnant, not using anything, not, so again, like another 8 years had
Yeah.
gone by. And then I find myself pregnant. And then about halfway through the pregnancy, they tell me there's a soft marker for Down syndrome, but what we're seeing is it's not uncommon for boys. And so we don't really think it's anything. But I was the one that said, well, I want the blood test to see because I just want to know. And so we did the NIPT test, which that test is kind of amazing because you can actually tell the gender at like when you're 10 weeks pregnant
Wow.
with that blood test, but they can also see if there's any chromosomal anomalies. And so anyway, they picked up that it looked like Maverick would have Down syndrome, and it said a 95% chance. And I didn't want to believe it. I just didn't want to believe it. It felt like, it kind of felt like my world was crushing down. Like, here's a pregnancy that I wasn't trying for, and now here's a child that has special needs.
And you
And
tried for so long to be able to welcome children into your family and just had so many challenges with that. I can see how that
yeah,
would
yes. Yeah, at the very beginning of the pregnancy, before we found out about Down syndrome, I struggled because I just felt like, how can this be? I'm 46, and now all of a sudden, I mean, in my 20s and 30s is when I really was trying and hoping and praying and
yeah.
all of the things that we did, and it didn't seem to make sense.
Yeah.
And then, when we find out about Down syndrome, it was like another thing, like, God, I don't understand, again, our age. And so it was a process. I mean, if you talk to anyone who has a child with Down syndrome, everyone has their story, and most people, go through that, like, you wrestle with this diagnosis and you wrestle
Right.
with, like, how can this be that, like, this doesn't happen to our family? And, like, you know, I don't even know about Down syndrome. And, like, how do
Yeah.
I raise a child with Down? You just have all of the questions, and, like, I'm not the one who can do this. And
Yeah.
um,
How
and
was
then, of
Rob?
course, Rob, he's so different than me. He's Mr. Optimist, and he's very, very smiley and happy all the time. And it was hard for him. He definitely, I think it was a blow for him too, but he took it much differently. Just like as we were going through the years of infertility, it was much different for him than it was for me.
Hmm.
But he just felt like God's got this. Like there's a purpose. There's a reason. Like it'll be okay, and it'll be better than we think. And but at the same time, we actually both were praying that it wouldn't be, that the test would be wrong.
Yeah.
And that's all I wanted to believe for the rest of the pregnancy. And I think I kind of had to have that so I could just enjoy the pregnancy. I just wanted to enjoy it and I actually love being pregnant. I'm one of those women that loves being pregnant. And I just wanted to enjoy, the rest of the pregnancy and then the delivery. And it was amazing really what God just did in our hearts and the changes that he did in us. Because even when he was born, both of us felt like it was one of the highlights of our marriage.
Wow.
Even though we had had three kids before, and those were very special moments, there was something like him and I were just so connected spiritually. And I think I was so connected to just even myself and my body. And like it's hard to describe. It's really hard to describe, but it was an amazing experience. I was still able to have him with a midwife, and I wanted to have him in a tub, and that was all able to happen. And so those were like answered prayers, because at first they told us, oh, you're gonna have to be at a hospital where there's a NICU, where there's all of these things.
Hmm.
But thankfully, he wasn't showing any signs of that he was going to have like a heart, defect, or he was going to have any kind of major issues. So my midwife really stood up for me and talked to the other doctors, and she was like, "No, I don't see any reason why she can't have what she wants." So
Wow. So this
yeah,
was
and
2022.
yes, yeah,
Maverick is 2 now.
yep.
So fast forward a couple of years, you get to spend some time with Maverick. Love the name, by the way. Love, love,
Thank
love
you.
the name. How has it been?
Oh my goodness. That question makes me want to cry. He's just a joy. He's a little miracle that we didn't know that we needed in our lives. And he is an absolute joy everywhere we go. I mean, when we walk, just the other day, it was my birthday and I wanted to go do some hiking. We were going down the path. He waves at everybody going by. And of course, it makes everybody's day. And yeah, he's very special. And I will say though that there still have been times in my heart where I'm like, Lord, I don't understand. It's still hard because like he's been really healthy. And I know that's not always the case with children with Down syndrome. And I'm so thankful, but I still see some of his challenges, like he's not walking, he's not talking. And I know those will come. But I see, just when he's around kids that are his age and, or other parents, they look at him and they kind of look at him differently. And, so you just get that you have to get used to and realize like, you know, it's okay.
Yeah.
And I really am not like, I'm okay with people asking questions, and I'm okay with the looks too, but you just have to like change your mindset of like, I don't need to take offense to this. It's okay. And I don't need to be hurt by it because
Yeah.
he is different than the other kids in the room. But
Yeah.
he still has value and he still has something to offer the entire room. And it's so easy to see when
Yeah.
when you're around him.
It's interesting
So
being on the other side of that because, Andrea and I have been blessed to have 2 boys that have Down syndrome. We adopted Coop from China in 2016, and Nash is our biological son that was born in 2007. And so being on the other side of being able to be entrusted a child that has Down syndrome, I can't imagine my life without my boys. They
yeah.
truly are a life changing and saving individual. They just are that type of people. The day before I found out that Nash had Down syndrome, I would have never chosen this path because
Yeah.
of the lack of understanding and the lack of
Hmm.
experience of being able to have that light and joy in your life. And so I definitely give grace to individuals who have not had that experience in their life because I was one of them that I would have been
Yeah.
very much not for choosing this path of Down syndrome in our life. But being on the other side of it, man, I wouldn't trade it for anything. And so it's so fun for me to be able to visit with families, in particular families that it's still relatively new. I mean, we're only talking a couple of years into it right now. And so
Yeah.
you still remember the time without Maverick, and you can be able to compare and contrast your life without Maverick and now your life with Maverick. And what a blessing it is, truly a blessing. So I would love to ask goals, vision, aspirations for Maverick. I mean, you're somebody that is clearly a perfect example of being willing to do hard things, being willing to follow that feeling in your heart and to be able to go and do things that are definitely outside of the 9 dots in a box. And
Yeah.
so for you, what are those aspirations that you have for your son?
Yeah. I think that I don't want to do this to any of my kids. I don't want to put any limits. And anytime I talk to a parent who has a child with Down syndrome who's already grown, that's the thing that I hear people saying is don't put limits. Expect
Mhm.
the same things that you expect out of your other kids. And I just look at him and I think there's there's some reason that he was born to older parents to, at this time in history. And I'm excited to see what it is going to be, that unfolds for him. I just, it's funny because sometimes I think I can see him and I on a stage somewhere. I don't really know if that's like in our future, but maybe.
I would say
maybe.
looking at him and following you guys on Instagram, I would say that's highly likely because this boy is like, I think any child that has a disability has a special light and a special way to be able to connect with people. But this little guy, he's something else. You really do have a very special son, and I'm excited to be able to see him over the years really sing that song that he's meant to sing. And there's no doubt in my mind he's been entrusted to your family for a reason. And it is interesting just to see the miraculous nature, oftentimes, how individuals with Down syndrome are brought into families. In fact, Andrea's cousin, her aunt and her uncle, they have a little girl that has Down syndrome, and similar situation. I think she's 8, 9, 10 years younger than their youngest, maybe even more. In fact, I think it's even more. And they had taken measures to where they didn't think they could get pregnant. And lo and behold, this little girl was entrusted to their family. And what a
Yeah.
blessing that she has been to that family. And
Yeah.
so I just feel so strongly that these kids truly are entrusted to us. And with that unique blessing comes a unique responsibility as well. And I feel that. And I share this sometimes, not often, because I've taken maybe a little bit of heat for it, but it comes from such a pure place, and it just resonates so much with me. Andrea, for Father's Day, many years ago, after Nash was born, gave me a picture, and it's like a painting, a picture of a painting. And as I looked at it, it's just a little picture, and I immediately looked at it and I said, "That's a picture of Jesus teaching a little toddler how to pray." And he's folding his arms and bowing his head, and he's teaching him how to pray. And I said, "That's beautiful, honey." And she said, "Do you know who that is?" And I said, "Oh, well, that's Jesus." And she said, "Yes, but not the person who you think." She said, "That's Joseph teaching Jesus how to pray,"
Mm.
as a little toddler.
Oh,
And that
interesting.
resonates so much with me because I feel so inadequate to teach this little boy, Nash, in that environment. And even today, now as a 17-year-old, I feel so unprepared and not adequate in so many different ways to be able to be this boy's father and to be able to help this boy really sing that song that they're meant to sing. Because at the end of the day, this boy's teaching me so much more than I could ever teach him. And it really is a sacred and special responsibility that we have, getting to raise these children. And so
Hmm.
what a fun visit to be able to visit. I hope that we could meet in person someday, because I'd love to be able to meet Maverick. I know my boys would love to meet him as well, and of course it'd be
Yeah.
great to meet Rob and all the other kids as well. But it'd be really fun to be able to give Maverick a great big hug. But Erin, in fact, I'd like to encourage our listeners to be able to follow you on Instagram. Your handle, let me make sure I get this right, is at Erin Eicher underscore IG.
Yeah.
We'll put it in the show notes. But you do such a beautiful job in sharing your journey and
Thank
being
you.
able to communicate so well through your Instagram. I'd highly encourage our listeners to follow Erin and be able to follow this little guy, because it's pretty amazing. But it's been a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thank
I
you.
am thankful for our interaction and that our paths have crossed, and I'm very much looking forward to the future. So, Erin, thanks for being on the show today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This was really great.
Wonderful. Thank you all for tuning in. As always, we highly encourage our listeners to give us a 5-star rating, make a great comment, and share this podcast. It's through your shares and through your liking of our podcast that this podcast gets in the hands of the people that it's going to be able to impact the most. And that's our vision, is to be able to inspire families entrusted with a loved one that has a disability, to help them to ultimately sing that song they're meant to sing. So thanks to all of our listeners for listening in, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks for listening to this episode of Conquering Your Clownfish. If you liked what we discussed on the podcast today and want to continue the conversation, please visit us at conqueringyourclownfish.com. And please don't forget to subscribe.